That's their go-to. We're going to write a poem. We're going to write a how-to. We're going to write a personal narrative. Find out what they're good at. What is their writing strategy? What are they working on at school? Are we working on good topic sentences? Are we working on conventions? Try to find out. Teachers will often put it on their website what they're kind of focusing on in their class lessons, or more specifically with their students. Ask them, what's the one thing you can do at home right now? And sometimes we figure that out together because we're a team. You're seeing things and we're seeing things as well. Spelling, I think I want to have time for questions and answers, but we have a whole thing about when to do invented versus conventional spelling. And typically, it's very much invented in kindergarten. Some sight words moving out of that as they're getting better at reading because they have to read to be able to spell. By second, third grade, it's about 80% of standard spelling. And a lot of it's the same word, so they're just figuring out how to do the words they don't know, using rules and lists. Third and fourth grade, using poetry. They're not doing spelling lists so much anymore because it doesn't really work. They don't actually remember it that way. They remember it when it's hooked onto a poem, when it's hooked onto a story they've read, when it's hooked onto a pattern that they know, so finding the patterns in the words they're trying to learn to read. And in fifth and sixth, doing all sorts of other ways, Greek and Latin roots, reference tools to get the spelling. So that's a quick one. Be a coach, not the writer, and ask more than tell. So finding those questions, that's a huge thing for your students. So we have two, maybe it's just easier to kind of separate into two parts. Or would you like to just have general questions for both and they can, because we could have like the 4, 5, and 6 over here and K1, 2, 3 over here. Would that be, what's easier? What would you like?
Well, just for both.
Well, there we go.
Have them come up so they're on the tape.
Pardon me?
Have those two come
Oh,
up so
please
they're on
come
the
up.
tape.
So questions or things that came to your mind or things you're wondering about. Mrs. Harpering has taught second grade, third grade, what else?
First grade.
First grade. So she is really an expert on the primary and going from emergent readers.
Oh, we're supposed to go, I didn't know what we were doing. Sorry.
And
Do you have a group that's like maybe half?
I
or
think
everybody just wants to
we
ask
have
you?
parents who are in both groups, so I think they want to hear everything. So questions that you have or wondering about, yes?
How much should I focus on my son editing his writing? Like, he misses the periods and the capital letters. He's in second grade.
I would say it depends on the situation and the purpose. When we do writer's workshop in class and we just want to get ideas on the paper, we don't want them to worry about spelling. We just want ideas, and we just say whatever sounds you hear, just write them down. We don't, because some kids won't write until they have every word spelled perfectly. And then they won't write much. They'll just get 3 words done in 20 minutes. So it just depends on the purpose and the situation, and we do both of those in second grade. So sometimes they have to, when it's something that other people have to read, or it's a final copy, yes, it needs to have all that done, but if it's a first draft, or just, like using the graphic organizer, if you can read it, then we'll be able to read it, so.
And I think a lot of times on something like that, especially taking that up into, as he gets older, it was what Linda was saying earlier, pick one thing. And because a lot of times I've seen kids just shut down. There's a lot of grammar rules. I mean, I'm still learning all of the grammar and mechanics for the subtle nuances of when it's okay to use your semicolon versus your colon and all of those kind of things. So pick one thing and just say, okay, we're going to take this one piece, maybe it's an at-home writing time, and we're just going to go through and we're going to find the ends of each of your sentences, and we're going to make sure that there's an end punctuation. And that be that, instead of, okay, then we're gonna, and then we're gonna, and I think that just one thing at a time usually has been more effective.
We all teach different parts of the writing process, and that at the end of the writing process, that's usually when we take them through, how to edit. And you can't edit all at once, you can't look for all those things. I couldn't even look for all those things in my writing, so we teach them to do. We start with the basics, like your sentences should begin with a capital letter. Go through your whole piece, whatever it is, and do that one thing, and then once they have that under their belt, we'll do something else. But sometimes it's, whatever it takes till you can move on to the next step.
And interestingly enough, the teachers are just now starting to put together a conventions, exit goals like they did with the writing, in which what grade level's really gonna hit what in order. So when that comes out, you'll know in second grade, we're gonna hit nouns, we're gonna hit verbs, and they are gonna leave being able to put in commas in a series or whatever it is. And so there's certain things, in third grade, it's gonna be adjectives. So really trying to scope out, I think we're the first school to kind of do this in the corporations, not except like that. To really get that vertical commitment that when they leave this grade, this is what we're really gonna hit. And that's gonna help parents to know we're gonna abandon all these things and really make sure they have that. And I think that'll be a liberation for all of us. Other questions?
And do you have specific tactics on planning? And I have a fourth grader in the office.
Yeah, planning, a lot of times it's, it takes a dialogue. If you say, here, I want you to, we're gonna write on this and here's a couple of ideas. For someone who struggles, especially when you have someone who might be out everywhere and wanting to write about this, but then it can't do justice unless you touch on this, and then there has to be some of this over there.
Well, it's
And then,
like we're
you're dealing
together
with,
at the house.
instead of a body paragraph of an essay, you're basically doing an introductory paragraph to a whole other 5-10 page paper. And so narrowing that down, and a lot of times it is just a dialogue. So what Linda was saying earlier of, soccer, what about soccer? What interests you about that? And getting that clear, I would say, what's your stance? What exactly are you trying to say? Say it with pride and strength. Once they can get that stance, and that would be something like soccer is the best sport for children between the ages of 10 and 12 to promote stamina through many realms of life. I mean, they're making a strong stance. That inside of what I've seen is that gives them this foundation then that they can go, okay, how do I want to plan out, how would be the best way that I can convince another person about this? And usually in that situation, they can narrow it down to maybe 2 or 3 different ways that could accomplish that task. Then you can say, okay, now we have to choose one of those 2. And I want you to come up with, and again, I just go with the 5 paragraph, because then that can always be ballooned out and expanded out from there. And if they can say, I believe this because, and I make them do 3 becauses, and then they have their 3 supporting details. And then that can, even for struggling writers, they'll have at least 3 paragraphs that they can put in there. And then advanced writers, they can take those 3 subtopics, then it can possibly balloon those out, and then that lengthens out to a larger paper. So planning on that, sorry, I went around. Often you have to find what is best for each child. Some are very visual, and so if you do a graphic, a spider spread, that sometimes will be wonderful for generating ideas, but not the best route to then take it to a paper. Because with that, I mean, I'm a very visual person. I can put my ideas everywhere. But then when I have to get to a paper, I have to take it to an outline. And I put empty bullet points and lay out, and then I can take from my chaos of brain that's over here, and I can pull out, oh, this is this goes here, this goes here, and fill in an outline. I have to use both, personally. And that's something that just playing around with that method, some kids can go straight to an outline.
And sometimes the teachers figured some of this out, and sometimes you figured some of this out, so the more coordination you have.
Ultimately, by 6th grade, we're working for them to get into that outline. And it doesn't have to be the perfect Roman numeral 1 and the sequence in and the triple I and all of those kind of things. I use arrows, and they draw pictures sometimes, but just showing a hierarchy of information so that they can see, oh, that's a smaller detail. That'll fit inside of a paragraph.
So how do you do that in fictional writing? Because the stance is very sort of easy and non-fictional.
Yeah, fiction, you take just the general, it's the 5 plot elements, and Rewrite I think has some beautiful graphics on
Just
that.
rewrite them documents.
And they lay it out so that what's your setting, what's your character, what's the conflict, what's the rising action, resolution, and done, or something like that. I always talk about it as a roller coaster, and then they have to lay out what are these main points of your story, because every story builds. And a lot of kids, especially fourth grade, it's like battle scene in the first 2 sentences, and then it's battle. And then there's, we wake up, or whatever, you know, they don't know what to do with
Or
that.
it's
'cause-
somebody's entire life.
Yeah, and so it is, you have to build that, and showing them that all stories start, I mean, it takes 50 pages to get into certain stories, and then, oh, it builds, and there might be a little relaxation, and then it builds again, and then, so having them kind of put their ideas on that flow, on that plot thing has been really, I think, worked really well. And you'll get possibly a lot of details, but I think ultimately that puts it in a scope.
With that second grade.
We do really basic plans, like we'll start, and like they even do this in first grade, we'll start with, like a story, might just have a beginning, middle, and end, and they'll have like one sentence, and then if kids are able to, we'll have them add to like the beginning, the middle, and then the end. And everybody's ready to do different things in different places, but like a personal narrative, like if you were gonna tell your life story, we might use a timeline, and then probably have some lines already set out, like when I was 1, when I was 2, when I was 3, and just one very simple, and then kids who are able to add more things to that. So we start off with a real basic structure, and then, you know, wherever kids are able to in their writing, add things. And we have them try to just put words down, not sentences, so they can see, you know, that's where they get hung up at early grades, is trying to write sentences in a plan when it just needs to be ideas. So we try to get them to do a word or just a few words, but, you know, they really want to write the whole sentence, and you're like, no, that's later. So, and for some kids, it's starting with a picture, so that will help a lot of kids. If they can have everything in a picture, they can remember, like you said, the child who can tell you everything that's there, even though you can't see what's in the story. Other kids just want to write, but we still like to have them do a plan so they can follow a plan and not go back and forth and change what they're doing. Like a how-to, a lot of us teach a hand plan. That's really easy because you always have your hand with you, and you can trace your hand, and you can number. First, you know, you do this, next you do this, then you do this. So that's another graphic organizer that's real popular. We do webs too. For us, it's just the different types of writing, more different plans lend themselves more to that. And we just try to teach them a few so that whatever works for them, you know, they don't all have to use the same one, but so that when they have to do something, just they're comfortable. It's like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. I've done this before. So that's the biggest hurdle when they're little, is that to feel comfort and that they don't need someone to help them do it all the time.
I had a good tip from a 5th grade teacher today, and with the hand, she had it like this,
Yeah, that's another.
which was not, this was the main idea in the thesis. So this is like, "Rah," and then each idea, and then the conclusion that's connected back up. And I
So
thought
sideways.
that was interesting. I never, always did it like that, but I just orientation is its own help, which was interesting. Kindergarteners, the ones who are ready and are writing 2 or 3 sentences now, the teachers are having writing groups, or some of them at the beginning on Monday, taking a personal narrative. I went to the beach. And then they'll take a booklet with 5 pages, and they'll ask how their plan's gonna be. And the first is, I went to the beach, turn the page. Sandcastle, turn the page.
Very basic.
Shell hunting, turn the page. Swimming, turn the page. Had fun. And then they're scribed for the rest of the week. Their goal is to write 3 sentences on Monday about going to the beach, 3 sentences on Tuesday about building a sandcastle,
Spread it all.
3 sentences on, they have a 15-page, 5-paragraph story at the end of the week. 15-sentence, 5-paragraph story at the end of the week. And that's powerful. So even in kindergarten, they're starting to get these longer things. And so that's, the planning's really scripted for them with the papers and the turning and all of that. So it's trying to find out what's appropriate for each of
Yeah, they really need the structure when they're beginning, just so they feel comfortable.
them.
And then
the
after
physical
that.
turning of the page. Of course, each of those becomes a paragraph in 4th grade, and so it's very concrete.
For a fourth grader, like, what do you expect in like depth of sentences? Sometimes I feel, he's thinking, but it doesn't come out like, it comes out very basic. So I tell him, use your vocabulary words and, kind of replace them with other words that you're learning. But then, first of all, the roadblock you talked about, getting ideas, I've been struggling like 6 months. I give him ideas, I try to get ideas from him, he doesn't seem to like anything. And then he's like, we're stuck every night. It's like, what do I write about? It's like the most common thing. And I'm like, write about anything, and I give him ideas, but it seems to be not working.
We probably do different things at primary than intermediate, so.
Well, I'll let you do sentence complexity, because I think you probably have great ideas on that one. But as far as generating ideas, some of the things that I found that have been really successful, and this worked when I worked with preschoolers, and it has worked with high-end 6th graders as well. But it just doing, I call it a write around or write the next line. And so you would start writing, and you said it was a son? You'd have your son start writing. And then I do it with my whole class, and so everybody gets out a piece of paper and they all start a story, and then I'll stop them about 3 or 4 minutes into it, and then they have to pass their paper to the next person. And so they will do this for hours if I let them. They're just like, this is the best thing ever. And it's a beautiful thing because my entire room is silent. Pencils are furiously going. They get the new story. They have to read everything that was there before, and then they have to come up with an idea off of somebody else's story, and they just go, and it ends up this beautiful thing. And so they're not waiting for the person to write and then it gets back to them, so they're all adding. So it's a constant flow of pen on paper. And I've seen that to just get them over that, oh my gosh, it's easy to write, I can do this. I've taken something of just describing, I'll act a fool, or how would you describe this person walking into a room? How would you describe that walk? How would it be lumbery? Would it be all wiggly? And we try to come up with some of the adjectives that would describe that, because we have a lot of images in our heads, but we don't talk about it. It's a point. Oh, it looks like that, or it sounds like that, and coming up with those words. And so a lot of time it would just be, picking something and describing it. And I've had them just stare at a group of people and write everything you see. What do you notice? I had one girl, she would write, her writing spot was under the table. And I said, well, write that perspective. She's like, I'm blocked, I can't write anything today. And I crawled under there with her, and I'm looking, and I said, oh my gosh, everyone's tapping their feet. Look at this. Just describe all the feet. And she wrote for all week on feet. And because and then all of a sudden just became fascinated with how people held their feet during periods of time. And so sometimes it's just completely, it seems odd, but those are the type of things that I think they end up really helping get over that block.
And sometimes it's kind of they have this idea of it needs to be this finished product, and really they just need to write, so it almost doesn't matter. So make it less high stakes and just more, we're gonna write, just pick anything, doesn't matter. Tomorrow you might have a good idea, have that shoebox of things and say, no idea today, okay, just tell me what's happening in this picture. Tell me what's happening in this picture. Then, after the verbal, write. And I know with my son, when he was learning to write, he had to do an autobiography in 4th grade. And 4th grade is a huge one, because they're going from 3 sentences to real writing. I mean, this is a known hiatus, that we know that's a difficult time. And it is, objectively. And he told me he had to do this autobiography, and I said, okay, when you were 3, we took out photographs, what do we do? He told me, blah, 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 blah. And I said, great, write it down. And it was painful. And so I had to scribe what he told me back for him for a while to kind of get him over this kind of freeze of it's supposed to be finished. I don't know what it was. To this day, I have to ask him. It'd be interesting if he remembers. Conversation tonight.
In Writer's Workshop, in primary, we do something called a quick write for like
Yes.
5 minutes often, and we just have little topics and model You know, throw out a topic and it's like, okay, your job is to put your pencil on your paper and just keep it going as much as you can. Don't worry about spelling, don't worry about writing the perfect sentence, just whatever pops in your head, write it down. And nobody talks, nobody gets up for tissues, bathroom, or anything, and so we do that often, and they get really used to it and comfortable at it. And then that helps too, because then it's like, it's not foreign to them, and then you can build their stamina with that and make it go for 10 minutes, or, you know.
We did just verbal activities, and
Yeah.
I know that this happens all over the place, but it would be like, okay, you have 1 minute, you have to stand in front and talk about popcorn. And so, you know, just talk about popcorn, the kids are like, that's super easy. It really isn't. 30 seconds into it, they're going, popcorn, pops. And it has the word corn in it. But sometimes they'll go, oh, that's a compound word, and I wonder if it got its name because they'll just start and they're on the spot in front of the rest of the class. But a lot of times with that, that's when I can see, oh, this kid has tons of ideas. They may just be struggling with, maybe they just don't like the way their handwriting looks, or maybe they're freaked out that they really struggle with spelling and they don't want to expose that part of themselves. And when you hear them talk, you're like, okay, you've got it. Now we just have to figure out a safe way for you to express it on paper.
And sometimes we'll do that with lists. It won't be sentences, it'll be a drawing.
You know, my son, he enjoys origami for some reason, but he wants to write like steps how to make. I mean, I'm like, okay, this is one part of it, but you need, it's like writing like few sentences, how you fold the paper, but you need to get beyond that. I mean, you have to, but it's just his
Have
thing.
them convince you in writing that origami, do you know how to do origami yourself?
Not much. I mean, he's into it.
Yeah, so he could, and say, you can't tell me how to do it, you just have to convince me to learn. And so then and maybe you'll get him to write a whole bunch on that.
And then you might be committed to
Yes,
learning
exactly.
origami.
That's the problem with that,
That's how I got my black belt in Taekwondo.
It's a struggle, though.
but, yeah.
And my son did really well in high school. And he got a big scholarship when he went out, so they do get past that.
And that's
It is hard.
Yeah.
And just work with the teacher.
We did, when we were buddies, we also did something, when I was second and you were fifth or whatever, we would do, you know, the overused words.
Oh,
Was that
yes.
part of the problem too, is we would make lists of words to use instead of.
Big,
And
because
we
if
would
all you can
use-
think of is big, you're boring yourself in your writing.
Good.
And we would put those up in the room, and so whenever we saw those in their writing, they had to circle those and take it out and insert something else. And the more they use those and they get comfortable with that, they'll use them all the time. But they are not sure they're using them the right way, so it helps if you help them and you give them permission, or sometimes if they have to, you know. That's an overused word, take that out. You've said big like 3 times, you know, is it really just big, or what kind of picture do you want to paint? We talk about that, so.
And then they'll say something that's wrong, that's totally adorable, and you don't have the heart to tell them. But you know they'll figure it out before they're done.
Thank you. Well, I want to say thank you to Mrs. Hitchings, Mrs. Harper, and Mrs. Koch for being here and just starting out with a lot of good information for home and learning about what we do here at school. They work really hard with reading and writing, and they go hand in hand. So thank you for being here tonight. That
And you're welcome,
supporting your
you know,
children.
any of the teachers, and call me, and happy to talk one-on-one as well, very, very much so, because sometimes, you know, this is all global, but when we can have an individual, then sometimes that's more helpful as well, so please feel free to call, email, come in.
They really do.
Find